Okay. Sorry about that, folks. There's a little bit of a false start there as we got started. My OBS just crashed in the middle of it. Sorry about that. Should be a little bit fixable, honestly. Hey, yeah, sorry about that. Random crashing issue. We're gonna keep going here. Yeah, technical difficulties. Alrighty. So we're back. Let's continue from where I left off because nobody's gonna see that because it got clipped and I removed it. So again, I think the cold ships, they're able to enter the warp. They just have to go with a ship that is hot.
Pt.17, you're free to take off.
Again, what is definitely like a heavy freighter, maybe some sort of Goliath variant of a heavy freighter. You can see it's got a massive forward piling and then all these extra double ranks of support structure here. Yeah, definitely a big boy. One of the things I love about 40K aircraft, and I'm not a huge aircraft guy in general, but the ones that can both breathe air and work on the surface are honestly pretty cool, and I like them a lot. So yeah, we've got that kind of shark assault boat here, and then what looks like two lightnings. So these are pretty big, and they can actually carry quite a few things. But they're kind of like our C-36 Galaxy. They're big transport aircraft. Usually they're used by Marines. Yeah, this one. So these, according to the guy, are his own custom variant of the Chimera. To me, they look like the OG Chimerax, which is essentially just a Chimera that you've modified into more of a light tank role. But this is like a massive, what is it called? The the F-13 or the F-113. What is it? Oh man, it's that French thing with an oscillating turret. Uh, French light tanks. Yeah, sorry, the AMX-13. Yeah, this is like an AMX-13's turret stuck on top of a Chimera because it is an oscillating turret. You can see the chin and the cheek bulges, and then this upper turret, which I think it is crude in this version, but usually it wouldn't be. Or it doesn't have to be, rather. And this, to me, this looks like a 90 mil or an 85 millimeter gun. And then, of course, they have a heavy bolter in the hull. These are very streamlined, and honestly, probably pretty expensive. Also, yeah, they fit the Imperium very well. Yeah, I, I wouldn't call these light tanks. These are definitely medium. Remember, the Chimera has 150 millimeters of armor on the front, and giving it a 90 or an 85 millimeter gun, especially a long gun, that's a lot of firepower. I'd call this a medium tank, for sure. This is not light. Even if that turret was unarmored, I would still call it a medium tank because of the armor protection on the hull. Also, yeah, see, this is what I was talking about. I find it interesting that they have them. Look at that. That's a beautiful side profile on these things. And I think fitting 3 tanks in there is pretty reasonable. That's actually a lot of space to fit those 3. They sometimes have in these videos that the crews are just sitting inside of the tank. That's not what you would do. That's not how you transport armored vehicles. Usually you transport the crews and the vehicles separately. Yeah, they have a gun much bigger than the Sherman, though not the biggest gun that the Sherman has ever used. The Israelis made a Sherman that had a 105 mil, which was funny. Yeah, nice P-38 Lightning. Holy shit. Look at these. Are these bombs? I think these are bombs, because they're not thrusters or stabilizers. These are like 500 kilogram bombs. Damn. That's really big for that thing, because that's basically a fighter aircraft. Yeah, you could also call them an anti-tank gun. Well, remember 150 millimeters on the front, 100 millimeters everywhere else. That's more than most tanks. That's more than most tanks of the Second World War, and it is definitely more than most armored vehicles in the 41st millennium. Remember, Chimeras are pretty much a medium vehicle just by default. In my estimation, they're tier 3. See, I like how like this is not a cramped driver station. but it's not great either because you're kind of stuck low and your seat's a little far back for you to see easily, so you got to sit up to be paying attention, which is a little hard. Yeah. Mobile gun platform would be a good point, but it's armored up very, very well for that. Our AGSs really only have like 30 to 40 millimeters of aluminum armor, which is resistant against some things, and then they have packages that get them up to resisting autocannon rounds. But 150 millimeters of steel will protect you against even some light tank cannons, like 5 centimeter and 37 millimeter cannons. Yeah, it's not horribly cramped, but not great. Oh, see, okay, it lowers him into his position. That makes sense. However, at that height, I could imagine, yeah, seeing into your periscopes here. This is going to be rather hard for him. He's going to have to really like push himself forward to see here. But you know, he has an electronic readout, so these are really a backup. So I could see that being not a problem. Also, apparently in canon, these things have a crew of like 4. You know, 1 driver, 1 gunner, 1 assistant gunner, and then like some sort of mechanical assistant, which is crazy. And then the bombers have a crew of like 11. This thing's huge. It's probably got like 6 or 7 people in the back, but I bet you this is probably like an anti-aircraft cannon, I would assume. And down here, you can see these ridgings. Since this is intended to land on the ground, I would assume that these are the gravity producers to assist with that kind of soft landing. Yep, see, what did I tell you? Anti-aircraft gun, for sure, 100%. Space Higgins boat, yes. And then this might be either missile or Auspex, it's difficult to tell. But yeah, you can see the crazy turbofan jet engines, I love these. This is cool. I I really wish we had these in more vehicles. These kind of adjustable forward banks, because even today in modern main battle tanks, we don't really have control surfaces that move forward and back to accommodate for like bigger or smaller people. Yeah, metal boxes. Yeah. So I think that this is a cool thing, but it definitely kind of detracts from the overall effectiveness because, of course, anything that moves or takes up space takes away something from the vehicle, whether it adds weight or decreases protection or decreases space. But in this case, the Chimera is a relatively spacious vehicle, and since these ones have been modified to be tanks only and not infantry fighting vehicles, I could understand why they would have that luxury. Very cool. Very cool. I like this whole Cold War electronics deal. Yeah, so you can see there is nothing pushing the air downward in this image. Nothing at all. These jet fans are definitely pushing retro, and they're pushing the opposite direction for sure, but the only thing currently holding this off of the ground is the gravity production on the lower hull. And so when I talk about ships managing to hit the ground and not explode or get destroyed, this is what I mean. That kind of ridging that is an indication of gravity being produced. And that means that they only need these little tiny struts to hold up a vessel that big. Okay, let's also talk about these while they're up here. Look at all these boxes. So we can kind of guess what a couple of these are. This one, this central one, along with the line of the gun, this is probably an assisted gunner's periscope. Essentially, this would be electronically attached to the gun itself. You know, when he looks through his telescope or his sights, he's seeing out of this central one, or what he's seeing is augmented by this central one. And then what you can see here, the spotlight. In the Cold War, these were used very often as infrared spotlights or infrared searchlights. And then this is probably an external radio or maybe another light. But these ones specifically, these kind of deep dish lights, they're usually either searchlights or they're IR spectrum lights, which allows you to see much better with your like primitive night vision. Goddamn, so cool. I like how curvy these boys are, because, you know, if they are intended to go up against tanks, which, let's be honest, from the gun, they probably are. Yeah, a sort of jumble of systems. Yeah, because that's what a lot of tanks honestly looked like. And this is again like from the front, these definitely look like infrared lights, and then these ones, maybe these are the infrared and these are that, but it doesn't matter. They could theoretically both be infrared because that means that the commander has a thermal and the gunner has a thermal. Yes, I do like curves. I like curves on my tanks, but I don't like curves that are indistinct. For example, I don't like American boat tanks like the Patton and the T68 and stuff like that. I do not like those. Those are too soft, too curvy. Like me angles, I should say, like me angles, not just curves. Angles. Angles are important. Yeah, honestly, this looks like an 85 millimeter. Like it looks like the oh man, it looks like the T-34-85's gun or the T-34-85M's gun, just with a big muzzle brake. Exposed treads, baby! And also, you can see that it has a wire hoop radio, which, by the way, is very cool. These kind of whip radios, these came about during the Second World War. Some of them were very thick and heavy. Other ones were just looped back to front. If you've ever seen the Panzer II radio version, it has this same exact kind of curved whip radio antenna. It just kind of shows that they're running out of space for stuff inside of the vehicle, and they're sticking it on top. I would assume to up gun and up armor a vehicle that much, especially a Chimera, obviously it's essentially turned around backwards and the turret is shifted to the rear. Kind of like the Ferdinand or the uh, Tiger P. A little bit like that. But it could also be that they're just shifting the entire design backwards and turning what was the crew compartment into the fighting compartment and then putting the engine forward. Putting the engine forward, like the Merkava, gives you extra protection, but it makes it more likely that your vehicle is going to be knocked out. And also, yes, gotta love the full battle rattle. Yeah, let's go right into it. Alright, so we are on a desert-ass planet, and important thing to note ahead of time, they are fighting the Blood Pact, and we'll talk about this because there are a lot of instances on here that we're going to talk about vehicles that belong to the Pact. So, oh man, okay, hold up, I need to get a good image of this. Alright, so we can see pretty easily, we've got a trench digger in front, we've got the old-fashioned, yeah, okay, this is 100% reversed. You can clearly see how this was the frontal fighting compartment of the Chimera. This is where the old turret was, and then this is the rear of the old Chimera, where there's a heavy bolter in the front. So essentially what they've done is they've taken the old heavy bolter position, chopped it open, made it an area where you can access the vehicle's fighting compartment, and then made the back half into a tank, and the engine's probably been moved forward into this area. Maybe it's even a bigger engine, that's quite likely. And then they've put a heavy bolter position way up in front. And there might be a driver there as well. So they've essentially flipped the Chimera around. By the way, the phrase steel coffins actually refers to the N20. Because that thing that I was talking about during the cult video, their reputation, people started calling them steel coffins because they were not well armored enough to resist like heavy autocannon and real cannon rounds or heavy artillery. They only had like 80 millimeters to 40 millimeters of armor. Wasn't a lot. Yeah, these are a bouncy ride with barely any like suspension and hydraulics for a vehicle that is this overweight. Because yeah, you know, the Chimera is heavy, but this thing takes the Chimera's weight and then adds a full-on turret, gun, and a bigger engine to it. Yep, modular retrofit is great. Yeah, so from the top, you can definitely see that it's an oscillating turret. They have the bulge at the rear for an autoloader, but I'm not sure if this one uses an autoloader. It could. Yeah, and you can see the old area at the front. It's hard for me to tell, actually, whether this is a reversed Chimera or not. Let me look it up real quick. Let me look it up real quick. Okay, so Chimera's flat in the back, curved in the front. So this is, okay, so it's not reversed. It's just been shifted back. So go with my first theory, not my second theory. First theory, not the second theory. Yeah, it could be an autoloader. For a 90 mil, that's not unreasonable.
Damn, this desert makes me sweat. We were better off on Culp.
Yeah, but the Talon need us.
Can't they manage on their own?
Okay, so they're talking about Kulf, which is a planet that I haven't necessarily heard of off the top of my head, but there are plenty of planets in the Sanguinary worlds that I haven't designed yet. And you can see again the kind of medium tanker helmet that these guys have. Throat mics, obviously, or face mics in this case. And they're mentioning the Talarn. The Talarn don't really take part in the Sabbat Worlds Crusade as much as you would think, because they have so many worlds that they influenced, but they were actually part of the, yeah, when they do... Well, see, there's a lot of other things. There are Talarn units that are just artillery, and that could be one of the reasons. So it could just be an artillery and infantry regiment, and they need armor support.
They suffered a lot of losses during their last offensive, and their recon was shot down.
Shit, what happened?
Talon getting fracked in the desert? How ironic.
Enemy reinforcements arrived at a bad time, not just random bastards either.
Tanks?
I don't know, but whole sections of the front went silent without anyone knowing why.
And what did the Talon say about it?
Not a thing, but command told us to keep an eye open.
Damn these desert boys, they never say any...
Contact on Auspex. 2 o'clock, 5 clicks.
Yeah, so we got Auspex here. This is an interesting thing about 40k vehicles. They have built-in, like, radar and sensors in a way that even our modern vehicles don't necessarily have. Like, there's no real point to putting radar inside of a large armored vehicle. You can pretty much identify with, you know, automated systems where heat dispersion is and where you can identify vehicles at long range. But the other thing is, since Imperial vehicles have to engage usually without a lot of air cover or without a lot of other support, you would want to have each individual tank not be relying upon primitive means to find enemies in the desert. And also, yeah, the Talarn do not play well with others. But they do play well with planetary defense forces. There are a couple of planets in the Sanguinary worlds that base their PDFs and actually kind of raise semi-regiments because the Talarn were the ones who liberated their planet and they took a lot from them. If you go into the northern sector of the Sabbat worlds, kind of outside of it, but, you know, near enough that they share a border, essentially, there are a lot of planets like that. There's 2.
Friendlies?
Unlikely. We're still 40 clicks from the rendezvous. Prepare ambush positions.
Okay, so prepare ambush positions. Let's remember how they said that, because we are in an open friggin' desert.
Cyrus, your bait.
Ah, thrown, damn it.
Stop whining and get in position.
Okay, what a crazy image. Holy crap. So definitely they've shifted everything back. You can see that this is the transmission between these two. There's the bulked out armor for the side. Obviously, most Imperial vehicles have a frontal armor on the side, and then they have a internal case armor. This was a thing in World War I, but it fell out of fashion because it takes up a lot of space. But the Imperials do it because it allows them to make 2 thinner armor plates rather than a 1 big thick one. And it can decrease the effectiveness of a lot of different rounds. But you can see here again that kind of gunner's thermal, the main thermal, scythe, the name of the tank, and that beautiful oscillating turret with what looks like a machine gun down here, and a heavy bolter position here. This heavy bolter position doesn't look like it can traverse all that much, making it slightly worse than the one on the Chimera. But here's your gunner, or here's your driver's position, and up here is probably your driver commander position, or they're in the hull like the other guy. But it's kind of unclear where they're sitting in this. But yeah, this is a little bit different from the regular Chimera's frontal aperture, so I'm not exactly sure how that'd work out. And I don't know why they have spikes, but maybe it's to help dig themselves in. That could be like an extendable dozer, or maybe it's just to pierce things and poke things. Yeah, so I'm not going to say that the front is any more armored necessarily, but the side, this is not bulked out for extra armor. This is just regular for the Chimera. The Chimera itself has 2 plates of armor, one on the outside and one on the inside, because the track, this area, is empty, and then there's a whole piece on the inside. There's not actual, like, room in here. This is just going to be some venting and cowling and other things like that, and then another plate of armor on top. So we've got 1 low, 1 high.
Position.
So he's in a hull down position. He's found a rock and he's put himself behind it. One of the advantages of these vehicles is they're relatively low to the ground in comparison to the Lehman Russ. The Lehman Russ would still be poking up a few feet above this rock in terms of its hull. So these are able to go hull down in much lower positions. And yes, the oscillating turret is cool. But you could do this with any tank. This is not a particular thing to oscillating turrets.
Enemy spotted.
Yep, so we got our gunner.
AT-70.
So, AT-70,
Stick 4s.
2 Steg 4s,
3 Chimeras.
3 Chimeras. Pretty indicative of the Blood Pact. So, let's go through that one more time real quick.
70.
1 AT-70, so 1 medium battle tank that is on par with them.
2 Stick 4s.
2 Steg 4s, which are those medium armored cars with either 20mm, 40mm, or machine gun armament. They're 8-wheeled, but in this they're 6-wheeled. You'll see he's using, for this animation, a very particular version of these vehicles, which is not uncanon, because there is no canon image of the Steg 4, but there are canon images of the AT-70, which I'm going to show you.
3 Chimeras.
So, we got our AT-70 here, Steg, 3 Chimeras. So this would be kind of an armored company for the Blood Pact. Obviously, usually there would be a couple more tanks, but clearly they've suffered some losses, and they're down here. You can also see his aspects. You can see his notations here. Operation, 1278. This is probably a distance. Range, he hasn't range found yet, so it's at 0. And then he's in crack, which is indicates that an armor-piercing round is loaded. The auto is probably zoom or night vision, or maybe it's heat suppression. And then blanket hot, that might be in reference to the gun being ready to fire or not on safe or whatever. But yeah, just some indications around his thermals of what's going on.
Copy. Cyrus, fire on the big one, less. 1.2 clicks.
So 1.2 clicks. So this is probably the distance measurement, like I said, 1.2 kilometers.
Nafao, left steg's yours. Lars, take the near steg down.
So their goal is knock out the 3 vehicles that have 40mm cannons, leaving only the Chimeras. Now, why would that be? Oh yeah, no, they definitely are. They're like the Puma. 100% they're like the Puma. And a lot of them are actually modified to have better armament, similar to the OG Puma with the 5cm gun. Originally, it only had a machine gun, and then they upped it to a 20mm cannon, and then they upped it again to a 5cm, and then they upped it again to a 75mm. But the 40K ones, the Steg, usually either starts out with a 20mm cannon, and then they up it to a 40, or there are versions of it that have multi-lasers, or I believe there's one that has a las cannon, or could theoretically have one, but that's a massive pull on its power drive. So again, they're knocking out the vehicles that could theoretically knock them out, so all the armored vehicles. So the Chimeras are probably not considered an armored threat, because while they are heavily armored, their only armament is going to come from medium caliber autocannons, multi-lasers, or las cannons. It's not likely that these have las cannons, but if they did, these Chimeras could be in trouble if they got closer.
On it.
Firing!
Alright. So that's a hit on what you can see here is definitely the AT-70. Now this is one version of the AT-70. It's the one that has a model, but the AT-70 is a medium tank for sure. It's got armor comparable to the Chimera, but it is a little bit smaller, and its gun is that 105mm hypervelocity. I don't like this version because it makes the gun very short, and then it has a hull weapon of, in this case, it's a low-caliber autocannon, but I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So, here's the AT-70 Reaver in its other configuration, the one that I like a lot more. You can see, it's still got that, you know, medium caliber 105, but it's very similar to that boxy outlay. But the armor, you can see, is similar to the Chimera. So, it's an Infardi main battle tank, mass-produced, lacking in speed or advanced technology. Weighs 64 tons, so it's only 10 less. Yeah, it's much cooler. I like this one a lot more. Height of barely 5 meters. Hull length of 6 meters, hull width of 4. But its armor is 40 millimeters at the lowest, so that's going to be top and belly armor. But 150 millimeters at the front. That's not bad. That gives it armor on par with the Chimera, which is one of the reasons why even with their guns, they shot to take out the track first, because trying to penetrate 150 millimeters of armor at 1.2 kilometers with their standard rounds it's not going to work. It's not going to penetrate. And this one, yeah, so this is called the long-barreled or the hypervelocity cannon. Now, there's a lot of differences as to how this works and how it functions caliber-wise, but I'm not going to go into that right now. There's a lot of different examples of how it might work. In my opinion, it has two different types of ammunition. The first one takes advantage of pure velocity, aka it's a really, really hot round with solid shot ammunition, whereas the normal ammunition is an armor-piercing high explosive round that's just a 105 round. So it's said that this struggles against the Lehman Russ in penetration, but you can see clearly hull mount turret, the hull mount here, and then the turret. It's a very good design. I like it a lot. And I think the stubby version of it that they have here kind of gives it a little bit of a disservice. But you can see they take out the tracks. And then you can see this is pretty big for a Steg 4. This has definitely been modified. You can see these are heat screens. Yeah, it does sound like it'd be APFSDS, but I don't think it is. The reason I don't think it is because it might be APDS. It might be discarding Sabo, but I don't think that it's a long rod fin stabilized one, just because of, well, the small caliber at 105. Yeah, it is like a BT series turret. Actually, it looks to me more like the Japanese Cheetos turrets. But yeah, you can see the 40 mil autocannon here. But these are probably upgunned and modified. But yeah, I think it might be APDS or just solid shot. The Cheeto or the Cheeto-ha or whatever the hell it is. There's a lot of Japanese tanks that have very strange names. But yeah, you can see the Steg. It's got 6 wheels in this. Generally, it has 8. There are versions of it that are much longer, but this one is pretty standard, and you can see why they're knocking it out, right? It has a 40 mil autocannon, and it could probably do some serious damage. Also, yeah, the riveting is probably an indication that it's been modified, and this is clearly a heat screen to protect the tracks. So, that's another example. That was a hit, but he didn't look like he took any damage there. So, the Steg is an armored car, yes. But it's pretty heavily armored for an armored car. And probably these versions that have less wheels and more protection act more like light tanks and allow the AT-70 to act as a medium.
Good shot.
And you can also see that he's put up some sandbags on his upper front plate, probably because there's some battle damage there. Or it's to protect any weak spot that he might have, because everything other than this is angled or has extra protection, you can see here. Yeah, it reminds me of the Boarhound as well. The Boarhound had 80 millimeters of armor, didn't it? I think that's, that would technically still keep this a tier 2 vehicle, which it definitely is, but it would be one of the heavier tier 2 vehicles. And you can see Chaos Star on the back, kind of the small turret, and then this kind of like a mini Lehman Russ body, which again, vibes pretty well with this. But you'll see with the N20 that there are other versions of it. Let me actually open this up. And get a similar, yeah. So, says hull-mounted las cannon. That one had some issues with reloading. Let me see. Requiring a gunner to aim by visual methods only. Again, visual methods only. That's what we had forever. Lacked gyro stabilizers. Can't hit on the move. Most vehicles don't fire on the move anyway. AT-70's armed with a hull-mounted las cannon. Again, this might have been a las pulsar or a pulse cannon instead of a las cannon, or a multi-laser, but there were ones armed with a las cannon for sure. 105 hypervelocity with a slow rate of fire, and it says unable to penetrate the side armor of the Lehman Russ. I think that's bullshit. I think this is essentially firing at the side armor of the Lehman Russ with that worst round at extreme long range. Because when they were talking about that engagement, it was roughly at a kilometer opening up on a Lehman Russ. But again, I think with the better rounds, it's going to be doing different stuff. So, longer and slimmer than the Conqueror cannon, produced a star-shaped gas burn when firing tungsten-cored rounds. So again, tungsten core rounds, that reminds me of APDS. Yeah, so it's talking about the cannon, which doesn't make sense to me, right? It's a 105mm hypervelocity cannon with tungsten-cored rounds. You're telling me it can't penetrate a Chimera? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That's completely ridiculous, actually. So that's what I'm thinking is, when they're talking about the 105 hype and saying that it can't penetrate the side armor of the Russ, I think that they're talking about the worst round, not the tungsten cord rounds, and they're talking about ones at extreme range, which makes sense because that engagement was a long-range round. Also, yes, tungsten cube. Yeah, fires high explosive shells as well. Uses an old-style volute spring suspension. Do not knock volute spring suspension. I am a fan of volute spring suspension. It may be silly, it may look weird, but it works. Heavy frontal armor capable of withstanding a hit by a tread feather. So again, that 150 millimeters of frontal armor, that's about right. But being destroyed by a second shot, again, fire 2 in the same place. Reavers are only a threat to Imperial armor forces when they outnumbered them. Again, coming around to the side, using special ammunition, I think the Reaver is absolutely capable of knocking out the Russ. And of course, you can knock out treads, knock out tracks, jam the turret, all different types of stuff. I'm going to see if I can find you a picture of the vehicle's chaos. Okay, let's see if we can't find the N20. Yeah, N20 half-track. Uh-oh. So, N20 half-track, light armor fighting vehicle, mounts a 70mm anti-tank cannon. Again, I don't think that's true. I think it's a 40 mil of anything. But yeah, it's a different thing. An N22 is basically the same thing. I'm going to find... Where's the Urdesh? There we go. Alright. Get rid of this. Alright. Let's find some production vehicles. Steg 4. Yeah, here's our Steg 4. And so this is the image that they have for the Steg. Which, again, this is the tracked version. There are treaded versions. But this one is marked as having a 40mm long Urdeshi. Which, yeah, again, long, quote-unquote. Long, low profile with a weak punch, 27 tons. Armor, 120 millimeters in the front. Again, that's a lot of armor. Oh, yeah, so, if you're talking about the Reaver breaking down, the Reaver would only break down or have issues if you fired the las cannon too fast. Yeah, I like the treaded versions as well. But, you know, I'm not against tracked versions either. I'm going to find that image of the N20. N20 half-track. Nope, I would like the 40K version, please. There is official art of it, so I'm going to find it real quick for you guys. Shoot. I know I had it somewhere. A lot of different half-tracks here. Alright. Just going to look it up real quick. Here we go. Oh my god, that's so small. Okay, hold on. I can find a better image of this, can't I? Somewhere? No, not really. God damn it. Alright. Well, we'll look at this for a second. Let's see if there's a bigger version. Open image in new tab. Open image in new tab. Okay, well that's just not working. Can I make this bigger? Edit image. Oh wow, that's absolutely fucking useless. Good god. Okay. Can I maybe get a higher resolution, please? Oh my god. That's so terrible. That's awful. Alright, whatever. Whatever. You get what I mean. It's going well. We had a messed up thing, but yeah, sorry. Getting back to it, because that was a long thing. And I do like to talk about these vehicles, and I'm going to leave the images up so we can reference them. If I get a picture of the N20 again, because there was originally a reference book that had all of this stuff in it, but I don't own it. I've just been looking up the images and finding them. But yeah. We're doing good. Slight obsession with mobile gun systems like the Striker MGS. Yeah, it's sad that the Striker is going out, but what do you think about the M10 Booker? Because I'm a big fan of I'm a big fan of the Booker. I like that kind of medium light tank support gun role. And the Booker using the 105 is a great decision. I love it. I really do. Wheeled vehicle with a quad mount of las cannons. I don't even think that would work. I think quad-mounted multi-lasers would work, but I think las cannons draw too much power. So you can see the kind of attachments for the volute suspension. Yep, we do need something smaller than the Abrams. I agree. So, you saw it there. So, we had 3 shots, right? 3 tanks, 3 shots. One of them knocked the track off the AT-70. One of them stopped that Steg cold. Probably not killed it, but gave it a good smack. Yeah, it does look like a Rust chassis, but as you can see, the actual hull of it, the actual hull is pretty similar to the Rust, and they've modeled it pretty well. You can see the 3 different attachments, and then the volute spring suspension, and the frontal, like, idler wheel tightener. It's pretty close. But the thing is, they fuck up on the turret, and they give it way too short of a gun. Screw off, Xfinity ad. They give it way too short of a gun, and they bring the hull mount way far back, as opposed to how it is in the image. But yeah, you can see that the armor on the side deflects that 85 mil round, which is pretty nice. But now they fired 3 rounds. Chaos fires back. Notice he stops before he fires because this is not a stabilized gun. Volute spring suspension is essentially a wrapped piece of metal that is springing up and down. Essentially, it keeps the pressure up and down. So think of it like a slinky that you've twisted really, really tight, and then you use the vertical pressure of it wanting to spring back into shape to keep the vehicle steady. It's slightly heavier, but it's a little bit less complex and, space consumptive than something like Christie suspension. And it's nowhere close to the complexity of torsion bars, because it essentially requires you to make less of that high-tension steel that you would need for torsion bars. I don't think there are any Australians here other than you, my friend, sadly. I wish there were. Invite some friends. But yeah, I think the Reaver has 2 different types of ammunition other than high explosive. One of them is probably tungsten armor-piercing discarding sabot, those tiny little armor-piercing bullets. And in my opinion, at close range, that will penetrate the front lower hull of the Lehman Russ as long as it hits flat, and it will definitely penetrate the side at combat ranges. But with its regular armor-piercing high explosive, it would have to get, under 500 meters to penetrate the Russ to the side, and it probably can't penetrate the Russ frontally all that well. And you can actually see with this, sorry, I want to back it up just a sec. Does anyone know what a slack track is? Because this is a slack track. So in normal tanks, there are tensioners and idlers that hold up the tread so it doesn't wiggle when you move. Slack tracks are when you get rid of those extra idler wheels on the top of the tread, and it goes like this. It wiggles more.
Frack, that was close.
Yeah, so you can see this is definitely auto-loaded, or an assisted loader at the least. Considering this is an 85mm cannon, that's about right. It's 5:32 a.m. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. After a week of Alfred? What was Alfred? I have no idea. But you can see, it's assisted loading because clearly you're supposed to put rounds in here, and then the autoloader automatically puts them in. I'm pretty sure this is the gunner.
Damn it, Sarge. Fire on that fracking Reaver.
Yeah, so they're definitely hitting multiple times. Hits the Reaver on the side of the turret. Again, this is a very short gun. I have no idea how they justify that this is the same thing as this. You can pretty much see that this is like half, literally half the length of the actual Reaver gun. I have no idea why there's such a... Screw off, Xfinity. Why there's such a huge difference in the gun barrel lengths here, because that is at least like 60% shorter. It's very small in comparison to the actual gun. And then you can see the up-armored Chimeras back here, and that Steg is definitely smoking. They fired off another 2 rounds, so probably at least one of those went into that Steg. And then you can see another hit here bouncing off the side of the turret.
Damn it!
And also, hold up, there was another little tank thing. Notice that they just fired, and they're reloading. They fired off 2 or 3 rounds in the meantime. But where is the gun? It has to return to a neutral position, in this case, angled up 15 degrees, with its, support here, in order to reload. And given this is a 105mm gun, they're actually loading much larger shells than the other tanks are. And you can see either this is a heavy stubber or a low-caliber autocannon. It's probably more likely to be a low-caliber autocannon. Probably a 20mm, if I had to guess, or a 23. So, Urdesh makes 2 standard autocannons. They make a 20mm and a 23mm, and then they also make a 40mm.
Gotcha.
So that was the gentleman to the side. He probably entered via the vicinity of these frontal section sponsons and probably crushed into the tank that way, managing to hit an area that had ammunition right before they reloaded. Gelenos, or Kelenos, is the name of this tank. That other tank is absolutely making a run for it. Yep, you gotta love a good turret throw that he's being shot at by armored vehicles that he probably can't penetrate from the front with his little 40mm cannon. Again, the detail on this says 40mm cannon. The detail on the wiki says 70mm cannon. No, I don't think that it's a 70mm cannon. I think that's a little bit ridiculous. Unless it was a heavily modified version. But yeah, this dude is going around to try and get a flank.
Last stake is time to bugger off.
And you can see the same thing as the AMX-13. He's shooting the rounds out the back once they're empty.
Positioning.
And you can also see the difference in the get up and go rate based on how heavy these are.
Do that in the foul.
Oh yeah, it's 100% like the Boarhound. It's like the Boarhound had a kid with the Puma.